Hello, I'm Marcus Louth, and welcome to the Anomaly Project, The Agenda, the show where we look ahead to our upcoming episode. Now, joining me as he does every week is Steve Mera. Now, Steve, this week's show is going to be really, really interesting. We're going to be talking about cryptids, UFOs.
Yeah, I
What are
love it
your
when it's
thoughts?
all, I love those things when it's all kind of connected. When someone has spent a lifetime in researching, they might have started on one particular topic like paranormal, but then you just led into balls of light in the sky, cryptid phenomena, and before you know it, you've done all sorts of different investigations and research. That's what it just expands and opens up. And I think, for the guests we've got on coming on, is just perfect for that because he's spent a lifetime in this subject. And some really interesting things when dealing with people are having multiple types of encounters. And I think you start to sort of see through this little veil that no, your incidents aren't just paranormal orientated, or they're not just cryptid, or they're not just, balls of light or UAP or whatever. There's a combination of things. And I think, a lot of researchers have dug deep and had to ask those questions because some people just won't connect the dots. It's strange, isn't it? I mean, people think, "Oh, well, I've had a load of paranormal incidents when I was younger, but we saw this cryptid when I was in my 30s," and they never think about, well, it's a highly profound, incident. Why would you not connect it? Well, and people don't like to say, but I think it's important that you've got to get the cards out, put them all on the table, and say, look, I've had experiences when I was younger. I've had paranormal things. I've seen lights in the sky, and I've seen strange cryptids, and I don't think that's by chance.
No, I think you're right, and I think this is going to be the case with our guest. Now, we're going to be speaking with Lon Strickler this week, and I think this guy, I think he almost flies under the radar. I mean, everyone knows who he is. He's well known, he's well researched, he's done
Yeah,
extensive work, but, I think he's done some fantastic work and probably should get a bit more
it's
accolades, really.
true. I think so. I mean, maybe, it could be some researchers, do that. But what I've noticed though, buddy, is that people which have the literally their finger on this phenomena
Hmm.
and seen for what it is, and I've spent this long times in this subject, sometimes, when the good stuff does get suppressed somehow. I've noticed it myself. There's other people, and you think to yourself, the voice, the time, the effort, the media, all goes to those which are kind of, well, it's another stone to the mountain we've already got. Yeah, we kind of know that. Some of it's a bit hokey, some of it's a bit dodgy. Where's the good stuff? The good stuff's buried away,
Yeah.
with probably not many views or not much network. But you know what? He's very, very well known. He's put the time and the effort in here. And yeah, you could always argue this guy, like many others, should be on the biggest podcasts in the world. Why they're not talking to him? And that does seem to be the case. People that seem to do the good stuff, the real good stuff, pushing this subject forward, advancing
Mhm.
it, just don't seem to get the airtime. And it's, I often think, why is that? It's a bit odd.
Yeah, and I think it does scream authenticity. I think a good example of this would be it's a bit weird this one, but where you've got say a pop band, a typical pop band who churn out
Mm.
pop hits, they're massively popular. Yet you've got a musically proficient band over here who are writing classics, and nobody even knows. Do you get what I'm
It's
saying? And I think that's
weird.
the case in all
I
fields
do
of
think that.
that's what
I
I'm
do
getting.
think that, but I've talked to many people which they've got the finger on the pulse, especially regarding this phenomena, and they see it for what it is, and the
Yeah,
connectivity, and how the universe has the reality that we understand has some part of play in the design of how we take this journey from a younger age. And how many times have we sat back and said, do you know what? Initiated experiences from 5 years age to 11 years age. And I believe Lon had his first experience around about 9. They're falling into these brackets, and then it changes like a snap of a finger. It changes the lifestyle. It takes them off this track onto this track, and they're going to spend their whole lives on this track because it's so hard to take a foot off it
yeah.
because it's a very obsessive subject and it's forever expanding, and it's really interesting. So I think, yeah, you spend a life journey, but who caused you to do that? Well, it's usually triggered by phenomena.
Yeah,
Usually,
yeah,
not many people just wake up one day and say, "Do you know what? I'm going to spend my life doing this." I think it is a reason for it, and even many of that I even wouldn't come forward and say because they don't want to consider themselves as an experiencer,
Yeah.
would rather be known as an investigative researcher, and but it's not you're not being biased on your conclusions. I think it's good point to come forward now and say, look, okay, I've experienced stuff, and I understand when witnesses talk to me or they're traumatized by
Mhm.
phenomena. I understand completely what that can be like. I think that's a good thing. But I do find it interesting. It always seems to be the case that you plucked out your life at a certain age and you're put on this track.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a phenomenon that's doing it. It's so profound.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, I think Lon's had several experiences, and I think why what I like about Lon is similar to a lot of the people we spoke to, similar to ourselves. He's not just looking at one aspect of the paranormal; he's looking at multiple things. Now, he's well
Mm.
known for investigating cryptids and Bigfoot, so we're going to have to speak to him about that. But I
Oh, for
mean,
sure.
you know,
Yeah.
I also think we need to look at some of the other things that he's experienced and investigated because I'm pretty sure and pretty certain, really, that he's investigated all aspects of the paranormal world,
I
just
think
like
he has actually. Yeah, I know that he kind of probably started within the paranormal field, and what you'd get into is like, well, paranormal. What's it normally consist of at an early day? Uh, Hauntings, poltergeists, and residual type phenomena. I know that he spent considerable time in Gettysburg,
yes.
which is very well known for in historical reasons for battlegrounds during the Civil War. I've visited there myself. I've experienced a few things. And it's a fantastic location. It
Yeah.
really, really is. But it's just one of many where people report having, I don't know, time slip encounters or you're experiencing things from the past. It's a recording or whatever. It's
Mm.
profound. Occasionally you get those incidents where people say, well, yeah, but it talked to me, or I see two civil soldiers, Civil War soldiers, Confederate soldiers were telling me to run, and you think to yourself, well, this, yeah, you do your research. It's not a reenactment. They're very well publicized reenactments because I've been there and
Yeah.
they're all over the place. But you tend to know when they're on and when they're not,
Yeah.
and they don't happen all the time. Take a lot of planning and stuff. These events. But there's these little nuggets that stand out. And you say, well, that's not a recorded event. That's interaction. So
Mm.
you do seem sometimes to get those events as well in these locations, and it fascinates me. And I do know he's gone into the cryptid phenomena quite large,
Yeah.
and that is an endless subject because you've got a world of phenomena at your fingertips now, researching cryptids that go back into ancient times right up to current times.
Mm.
And you've got your Bigfoots, your Yetis, your Sasquatch, your abominable snowmans, your Malman, your Yowie in Australia. Interesting that they all seem to be very similar, but sometimes the way they interact is different depending on where or who they're delivering this phenomena to, what they believe, their upbringing, all sorts of different things. So, but the cryptid phenomenon is massive, and if you were to just write a book on species of cryptid phenomena, you're
Yeah.
into thousands upon thousands. So, where do thousands upon thousands of varied, different, strange creatures live or come from?
Yeah.
It's so profound that there's so many different things, and they're still apparently currently being seen. And I know he's been working in places looking into those cases even more current times within the
Yeah.
last 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, I follow Lon's work, and I know he's been doing a lot of investigations on like the Mothman sightings in Chicago, for example,
Yeah,
because the
fascinating that.
state of those. So we'll have to talk
Yeah.
to him about that as well. What I
Mm.
like about Lon as well, again, though, is he doesn't shy away from looking at these other aspects. Like a lot of
Mm.
people, for example, I mean, last year sometime I was in a paranormal forum and I was speaking to a woman. Well, she was asking for information on an experience that she'd had. And she was saying that she was waking up in the middle of the night, her clothes had often been removed, she'd had dirt on her feet, and she thought it was some kind of ghostly phenomena.
Yeah.
One thing
Yeah.
she said that really stood out to me and made me took an interest in it was she said she used to wake up and have dreams of seeing an owl outside her window. And as soon as I
Oh,
saw that, I got online saying, "Oh, hello, just want to mention this." And I basically said, have you ever contemplated that everything you're describing it could actually be an abduction? And she just
yeah.
didn't want to know. She was
No,
happy to say, well, it could be a ghost. That as soon as you brought aliens in or anything like
I
that,
know.
no, I don't want to know about that. So I like
It,
the fact that he's investigating these sort of things.
it is just as profound. I don't know why people don't think. I mean, oh, I only saw a ghost. Oh, no, 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 oh, definitely not alien. Nothing to do with that. But you think to yourself, well, there are both extremities of the supernatural in some sort of sense. It's just not normal, hence paranormal. And, some people just shy away from that. And I think really because we've been intrinsically taught to think about spiritualism from the very early days and that the possibility that, we might see apparitions or ghostly encounters with people or
Yeah.
spirit people from the past. And I think that's been accepted. It should never have been accepted so openly, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
because it does require the same scientific endeavors to look into that phenomenon as any other does. And to be honest, now scientists are saying, well, if extraterrestrials are out there and they could be, maybe they are visiting Earth and then people might experience it. Well, yeah, okay, so it's not a massive big pill to swallow because we might consider ourselves one day to do that very same thing if we were to find some lesser intelligent species on a planet. We might do those sort of things. And they might be sat there going, Mum, I've been kidnapped by an alien when it's actually been us, So it's, you kind of understand that. But it should all be, examining the same manner. And I think like Lon's, what he's realised is that is the compartmentalization of all these subjects hasn't really helped too much over the years. I think it's caused some issues. And I think it also deters you from finding conclusions because those conclusions aren't in the subject you're working in. Might not be in the paranormal. You're investigating the paranormal case, but you're talking about strange lights that are being seen as well. Well, what are they? Well, they were floating around the sky above my house. So are they paranormal? Are they fall into the subjects of ufological or UAP stuff? Oh, well, I think they must be paranormal lights, and that's how they first be were. Will-o'-the-wisps, ghost lights, paranormal lights, balls of light seen in the sky. A lot of them fell into the paranormal aspect.
Mm.
But if you just take it out and drop it into that box, it means something completely different.
Yeah.
So, and this is where we have that problem, compartmentalization. I think Lon's realised that, well, I think they're better without them and just call it for what it is, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, as you say, I mean, he's a Fortean researcher as well, so he's really quite, experienced on all this. Um, so yeah, I think we need to get his views on why we ask most people really, how we investigate this as we move forward, because I'm pretty certain that he sees connections in the same way we do.
Yeah.
So I mean, it'd be good to get his thoughts on how we progress, how we move forward with
Hmm.
research, and where he sees it going
Well,
ultimately.
yeah, I mean, I'd like to find out a bit more about his first initiated experience.
Yeah,
I do believe he was about 9. I think I've heard him say this before
certainly a
on
young
shows.
child. Yeah.
But he's an American,
Hmm.
and he's got his finger on the pulse in regarding UK. He has networks, and this is what's really good about these researchers. They
Yeah.
spent the time and effort networking. And I can tell you from anybody who's out there doing research, it's absolute gold dust to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you can break down language barriers or even just, just how people think
Hmm.
or feel or believe about experiences is a big issue. And I know that he's conversed and talked and with many researchers in the UK, though that we don't have a huge amount of cryptid researchers in the UK because we don't have a huge amounts of incidents, but we
Hmm.
do have them. This is the thing.
Oh yeah.
We do have those incidents.
Absolutely.
But he's in talks with them and he's been in communications with them. Networking is a really important issue because what's going on over here is sometimes going on in the US and other countries around the world. Just because we don't hear it in some countries doesn't mean it's not happening because
Hmm.
I've discovered things. Might be on a foreign website, might be written in German or Russian or whatever. But if you put it through AI now or change
Oh
the
yeah.
language,
Translate it.
we're
Yeah.
talking about the same stuff here, and
Oh yeah.
yet it's
Yeah.
been unnoticed for years that these things it's a global phenomenon taking place, and there are various different researchers going about it in their own manner.
Yeah, and I think the internet's obviously changed everything. I mean, it's changed whether you want to call it real life, but it's changed the paranormal world as well. Because as you just said there, I mean, I remember reading about the Dyatlov, and we mentioned this last week, the Dyatlov incident, and
Yeah,
the
it's
Russian
fascinating.
website, and
Yeah,
it was absolutely full. All the case reports. Click of a button, it translates it into English for you, so you can just read all this stuff.
it's
And I think
great.
it's making
It's
the world a
great.
smaller world now.
It
I
really
think
is.
you can
Yeah, I
research
mean,
things on the other side of the planet. Really, it's amazing.
it is helpful. I can see that there's so many good points. I mean, years back, I had to go to libraries to get information.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There were no internet around when I got into this subject, so I was totally reliant on libraries.
Hmm.
And after exhausting all 30 odd books in my local library on subjects of paranormal UFOs, there wasn't many around. I had to order books. They had brought in a service where you could order books to be delivered from one library to another, but you'd wait a month for it to turn up, and and it was just like, oh God, how long is this going to take? It was a nightmare doing the research. It was very long, very long, tedious typing to do and
Yeah,
taking notes and things like that. But it was hard work. Now it's a click of a finger. It's
yeah,
got, that's the good part about the internet. It's the resources and just breaking the world down on the press of a button. You're in another country. That's fascinating and it's great and rewarding to the subject. But then there is the dark, the darker side of that is that there's a lot of disinformation being
yeah,
used sometimes purposefully on the
yeah.
internet, and you can't trust what you're reading to be true.
No, you've got to
There's
cross-reference all this stuff
so
for
there's a
sure.
downside, there's a good side and a positive side. I think for me, research has been the main thing, but then with anything, you always have to ask the credibility. Maybe we didn't ask about so much credibility years ago when they were just in books and not on the internet.
Yeah,
But we should still do that. We should still go back and say, well, book is 40 years old. We based a lot of our work and principles on this information in this book, but how credible is it? Because just because somebody wrote a book doesn't mean that they're right and doesn't mean that it's
no,
truthful. But at the end of the day, you just got to build on your own common sense, and long-term researchers will see patterns. It's
yeah,
pattern recognition, like you do, like I do. We see patterns of recognition. We go, okay, yes, this is a pattern here. He did some authenticity here about this. You just kind of get that over time. I think it's a bit hellish for newcomers to this subject because God, what a spin they'll be put into.
yeah,
Because first off, they're going to say, "Oh, I believe everything on the internet regarding the Pentagon and the UAP,"
yeah,
and we know this, Marcus, that it's far from truthful most of the time.
yeah,
And they like to put their own spin on this for their own reasons. Sometimes it's to capitalize, profiteer, whatever, or just make a name for yourself in some cases. But you know what? You see through it the longer you get into this subject. So I know it's worrying where we're going to be in 10, 20, 30, 40 years' time. Who's going to come and fill the shoes? Who's going to carry on the work? I think it's hard to get people involved in this subject now, but the good researchers, there's still some great ones out there doing the work like Lon does.
yeah.
And he's published quite a lot of books as well, hasn't he,
Yeah, I
over
think
the
it's about nine
years?
or ten books. I think he's published.
That's a
Fair
fair
few.
whack. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
that's a
fair few, and
dedication for you.
yeah, and he puts out regular, articles and blogs on phantoms and monsters. So he's really in the thick of all this, and he's out there investigating as well. He takes on cases and he
Mm,
investigates them, and I think he reminds me a little bit of what Katie Page was talking about when we spoke to her a couple of weeks ago about
yes,
understanding history and respecting history, and you were kind of alluding to it there
very
as
true.
well.
You have
By
to.
looking at history, you see patterns, and
Well, yeah, because you know what? Sometimes people ignore things in the past, and that is probably the most important information is what our ancestors told us, or tried to tell us, or
yeah,
left messages or information behind it, and that lasts the time. Is that this is not a new thing. This has been going on for a long, long time. It has been, designed and constructed to interact with various people from all over the planet in various different ways, using various different masks. And
yeah,
how we all go about understanding it is, we all have a pieces of the puzzle to put together. Nobody can do it on their own. There's not enough time in a lifetime to do this.
there really is.
But I'm always interested when researchers come forward and have spent a lifetime in this subject, is about what personal things have they experienced during their journey. Because normally, when you talk to people, if they spent more than 20 years in this subject, 30, 40, or what, even sometimes more, and you ask them, they're going to turn around and tell you some odd stuff. They're going to turn around and say, well, I had this experience, during my journey. And you think to yourself, wow, okay, well, you know what? I've heard these things before, that
Yeah.
the researcher becomes the experiencer on the journey. And it's surprisingly how many people that's happened to.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think I don't think you can spend any amount of time in the paranormal world, whether it's a researcher or even as an enthusiast, and not even if you don't see something, just not appreciate or experience or just the energies around this sort of stuff that you're dealing with. You know what I mean? And I think it forces you to view reality in a completely different way. You know, and I'm sure that'll be the case for Lon as well. I mean, you know, so we'll have to kind of like you say, we'll have to speak to him about his experiences as a child. I know he lives, you know, he grew up near Gettysburg, which you spoke about before.
Hmm.
And I'm sure that's a paranormal
Yeah.
of sorts as well, you know, that
Oh
we
yeah,
can
there
look
is
into.
hotspots, and I think if he's put the time in, it would be a good question to ask him about. Do you think there's a geological connection here and between the phenomena and the land? Because if anybody's put this length of time in, I'd be very surprised if they haven't made a connection.
Yeah.
That yes, there's something going on between the land and the phenomena, some association. And I think, and I've heard this come from people that spent a long time in the subject and they kind of realized they've worked it out for themselves for their own research. And they kind of that light bulb moment, euphoric moment one day and go, do you know what? It's connected. Now you start to open another door and say, well, why and how and those sort of things. But I think it'll be interesting to find out a little bit more about if he's had some revelational moments where he's gone, oh, an epiphany. There's something connected here, and how does that work? Because a lot of people do, but mostly they may have been tapped on the shoulder during their journey and had a profound experience. I'm wondering if he has done. Be interesting to
Mhm.
find out. So.
Yeah, definitely. Because as you say, I mean, I think he's been in this research for decades. So some of his
Yeah,
personal experiences must
a
be.
lot of things have happened over decades.
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
no research of cryptids, but what's the most famous cryptids in the world? Well, you'd say probably the Dogman, the
yeah, yeah,
Bigfoot,
yeah. Bigfoot, I would
Bigfoot, the
say.
Dogman, the Mothman. You
Yeah.
know, those are probably the three biggest in the world, I would say. Are they still well, the age-old phenomena? Um, and it's not just taking place, in Mount Pleasant, but there's been previous incidents. But are they happening currently? Well, the answer would probably be yes. You've got current incidents of a flying humanoids.
Hmm.
You've
Hmm.
been like the Mothman.
Yeah.
Current ones of dogmen, which used to be maybe referred to as werewolves, and
Yeah.
current ones of Bigfoot. They seem to be all over the world, and people having these experiences. But there does seem to be slight differences between them, where your Bigfoot might be just some type of elusive creature that you might see out in a rural location.
Mm.
The werewolf, or they should say the dogman, is a little bit more intrusive. It seems to follow you, give chase, cause fear, that sort of thing. The Mothman, tied to seemingly ties to sometimes the locations where supernatural or geological things have taken place.
Mm.
But what is interesting is that there does sometimes seem to be these varied cryptids, like the Skinwalker and the Mothman and many others, have got these internal glowing eyes. And I don't mean reflection from a
Yeah.
torch or flashlight. I'm on about interiorly lit, the glowing.
Yeah.
And not always red, sometimes orange, sometimes white. It varies, but most are red tend to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is that? Is that an indicator that, well, if a dogman has, and if a mothman has, and if a skinwalker has, then are they same thing? But that's the giveaway. It's a key to say they're the same thing, but just looks different.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. With the Mothman, particularly, you know, with because I mean, the Mothman certainly the 60s sighters didn't really have a head. It was more like a body with eyes there. And
It was, yeah.
if you look at the Flatwoods Monsters UFO case, which was a
Oh,
bit controversial, but it's a very,
crazy.
very, very similar picture.
1957 Flatwood Monster. What the hell is that? Well, to look at it, you'd say, well, it's got to be looks a bit alien orientated. It's in some type of bottom part. It looks a little bit mechanical, which is floating
Yeah,
off the ground. This is strange fumes coming off. Sulfur smells so
yeah,
bad, which is indicated by the paranormal, demological, and all other things.
yeah,
But the people, the young kids that saw it, all fell ill.
yeah, yeah,
Hynek was called out to investigate. It was such a profound, unusual case. It just got referred to as the Flatwoods Monster Incident from 1957. To me, it stands out.
mm,
And one of those reasons is because of it, how it looked, how it
yeah,
acted, and the strange, there was like a greeny, foggy mist, and the strange sulfur smell, because that
yeah,
sulfur smell has been associated with look, the Virginia case, from 1996, and
mm,
other cases, the Falcon Lake incident in 1967, wasn't that? I think,
yeah. It was
there's all
like,
these sulfur smells associated to,
all the
these
time.
strange beings, and we've got it in the paranormal, we've got it in the demonological, so maybe these things may be connected in somehow. I don't know, but it's interesting that
It
they
is
have certain
interesting.
accounts.
I mean, and just one more to throw in there, I think, is the Kentucky Goblins case, which I think was around about the
That's
same
right.
time, and again,
Yeah.
you've got those glowing red eyes, and it's like cryptid sort of
1697, they were
creature.
during the witch trials of 1697. I think they were during the witch trials. The rooms filled with sulfur. It's the smell of
Right. So
sulfur.
again, that's another
What is,
thing.
what is all that about? It's
I mean,
so
sulfur
weird.
comes up so many times, and
I
not
think this
just in
subject is just
paranormal.
it's just designed to cause it's just pull our hair out. It's surprising you and me have got any hair left. We're just trying to pull it out, thinking, what the hell? We're desperately trying to put an order to something that doesn't seemingly have an order.
Hmm.
It's as if some intelligence is behind it to say, you're not going to get these dots together. I'm going to throw all these strange absurdities in that you're going to go, I'm just giving up because I can't even begin to understand it. And I think that's what it wants sometimes, that we just think, it is too crazy for anyone to believe.
Yeah, it certainly throws a lot of information at you, and the thing is, you've got to consider all that information because otherwise you may just miss a clue. I mean, but I mean,
Yeah,
like we've said before, this is kind of what keeps it all interesting. This is why we love this stuff.
we do, because it's never ending. It's a
Mm,
never ending journey of
yes.
information and stuff we're always learning. And I'm still learning, 41 years now, and I'll never get it all in my lifetime and all that. And I think Lon might be starting to think the same. I think he's been at it longer than me. And he'll probably be thinking, do you know what? Probably, have I put a dent in it? I hope so. Hope so, that you might have leave some type of footprint behind to say, well, okay, you had a good stab at it, Steve, as much as I could probably, give him a lifetime, and many for others. But altogether, though,
Mm,
people like Lon and others around the world, we all got a part to play. All those little pieces add up.
yeah, they do.
And if it just means that, okay, well in the next century we're going to be thinking completely different about this phenomena, then I think him and many others have done their work to get us
Oh
there.
yeah. I mean, the thing is, as unfortunate as it might be, I mean, the stuff that you could have wrote, or I could have wrote, or Lon could have wrote, or said at a conference, that might not even get picked up on until 50 years down the
Yeah,
line. And someone said, "Oh, I see." You can spark something in somebody and say,
yeah,
"Right, this guy was onto something," and you just don't know. So it's always worth putting this stuff out there because you just don't know
always.
what's going to influence.
Oh yeah, you can look through old cases in the 1950s, and then suddenly something sparks out, and you go, oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's very currently been talked about recent times. Why did not? Oh,
So,
it's kind of been, stepped over. Nobody's realised or whatever. It's worthy to go back and look at some of the old cases, definitely, because we can re-examine them now in a better way
yeah.
and connect it with some of the stuff we currently know, which is different than what we used to know years back.
Yeah.
We know so much more now about this phenomena and how intrusive it can be and how invasive it can be. The complexities are so profound. It's a trickster, it's a complicator, it's intelligence, it evolves, it learns. It's clever how sometimes it can stay one step ahead of us, but maybe that's part of it. Maybe it wants to spend a lifetime or if millennia
Yeah.
hiding its face. Then maybe we might have to face the facts one day and say, look, it's always going to be one step ahead of us. But it's a hell of a journey, and at least we're learning about the world we live in a little bit more than the average individual. And for me, I think that's really important. And I think once other people like you and like me, they've got the taste of the subject in our bloods, and like Lon and others, you're on that, you're kind of on it, and you can't. You'll never get off it. You can try it, but it will drag you straight back. It's like part of the learning curve. But isn't it fascinating that you can actually sit there now and say, I've experienced that things that a lot of these people haven't, and that is something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you've
Yeah.
you've experienced stuff, and you can probably when you go to the supermarket on a Sunday and you see all this, them people milling about, and you sat there waiting for your partner to pick up something or whatever, and you just think, how many people here actually have got a bit of knowledge about some of the
Mm,
stuff that goes on? Probably not many,
I know what you mean.
surprisingly. They might
Yeah.
watch the odd thing on TV if they're interested, but then that's all. It's entertainment. But for anybody, you're probably thinking to yourself, wow, am I the odd one out here? Am I the weird one?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that could be by design. People are just too busy, aren't they, really, to look at this
I
stuff.
think so.
there's a few people that would like it
Yeah,
exactly that way.
I
One
agree,
thing I
mate.
am certain of, though, Steve, is that it's going to be a fascinating show.
I'm
Uh,
sure it will be. Yeah,
so,
he's very well known. He's researched done.
yeah,
He's wrote books. He's got good information out there, and of course we can share some of that. And I think there's a rumor that he might be another book on the way. And I know he's not done anything for a while, so
we'll
be
certainly
interesting
have to
to
talk
find out.
about that.
Interesting. What news on the coming along? You know.
Definitely, definitely. So, Steve, thanks for joining me. I cannot wait till we speak to Lon, and you guys will be able to watch that show on Friday, June 27th at 9 p.m. Thanks for joining us. As always, make sure you leave your comments below, subscribe to our channel, and follow us on social media. Until next time, goodbye and take care.